Imagine standing before a blank canvas, pure, untouched, waiting. What would you paint if every brushstroke represented a choice, a dream, a part of who you are becoming? Because sometimes the most terrifying and the most beautiful thing in life is a fresh start. David sat in his small studio apartment in Brooklyn. The morning light spilled gently through the window, landing on a white canvas that had been sitting there for weeks, untouched. He was a UX designer, creative by trade, but lately, everything he made felt empty, predictable, as if he'd been painting the same design, the same life, again and again. He stared at that canvas, the way we often stare at our own future, full of possibilities and full of fear. He whispered to himself, "What if I ruin it?" That thought, that single whisper of doubt, froze his hand every time he tried to begin. You see, before every new beginning, there's always that tension between excitement and uncertainty, between the urge to leap and the fear of falling. David's life had been full of faint sketches, unfinished ideas, half-lived dreams. Each one left a trace, like pencil marks you can still see beneath the paint. He remembered the startup that failed, the relationship that ended because he chose safety over love, the creative projects he abandoned halfway. Sometimes he would scroll through old folders on his laptop, sketches of apps never released, notes of dreams never followed, promises he made to himself but never kept, and every one of them whispered back at him, reminding him that starting again had always been his hardest art form. Every mark whispered, "You failed before, you'll fail again." But one night, as he sat under the hum of his desk lamp, he took a deep breath and reached for an eraser. He began to rub gently over an old sketch he'd made years ago, not because he wanted to forget, but because he wanted to choose what stayed. That's the thing about the past. It doesn't disappear when we let go. It just stops defining the edges of who we can become. He realized that every time he tried to erase too hard, the paper tore. So he slowed down, more gentle, more patient, and whispered, "It's okay. I can begin again." Erasing isn't about pretending the pain never existed. It's about clearing space for something new. Sometimes we must clean the canvas, not because the picture was bad, but because we've changed and the old image no longer fits the person we're becoming. The next morning, David made a decision. He brewed his coffee, opened the window to let the cool city air in, and this time, he didn't overthink. He dipped his brush into the paint and with trembling hands made his first stroke. It was uneven, imperfect, but real. And in that imperfection, there was honesty. He smiled for the first time in weeks, because the hardest part wasn't painting the canvas, it was daring to begin. As days passed, colors began to bloom across the surface, deep blues of hope, streaks of red for courage, soft yellows for the fragile joy of trying again. Sometimes the paint dripped, forming strange shapes. Sometimes the colors bled into each other. He caught himself thinking, "This isn't what I planned," but he kept going, because life rarely unfolds in clean, perfect lines. The accidental splatters, the unexpected hues, they're what make the painting alive. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the window pane, he reached for a jar of dark paint, but it slipped from his hand and splashed across the canvas, ruining what he thought was his best work. For a moment he froze, ready to give up again. Then something in him shifted. He leaned in closer and noticed how the dark paint created depth, shadows, contrast. It was messy, but it was beautiful. That was the night. He realized sometimes our mistakes don't destroy the masterpiece, they complete it. Weeks later, David hung his finished canvas on the wall, except it wasn't really finished. He left one corner blank, intentionally. When his friend Chloe asked why, he smiled and said, "Because I'm not done becoming who I am yet." And isn't that true for all of us? We're all unfinished masterpieces, constantly adding new colors, new textures, new depth. Each choice, each failure, each act of courage becomes part of the art we're living. Some days we paint with confidence, other days we barely hold the brush steady, but still we paint, because that's what it means to be alive. So if you're standing before your own blank page of life today, wondering whether you're ready, whether you're enough, remember this. You don't have to know what the whole painting looks like. You just have to pick up the brush and begin. Because every masterpiece starts with a single imperfect stroke, What will your next stroke be? Share your canvas story in the comments below, and let's inspire each other to paint lives we're proud of. If this story touched you, subscribe to Story Lantern, where every story is a light to guide you through the dark.